Good morning, YouTube. This morning I woke up and I was full of fire in my belly because I drank till the wee hours of the morning and I started thinking about what's wrong with our society. Of course, it's easy to think, oh my gosh, millennial steam's at it again. The cost of prison labor versus expenditures per prisoner. This chart is an awful representation of what America's incarceration problem looks like. A prisoner here in Arizona makes $1.50 per hour, which I thought was a lot more than what I expected. I thought they were making 10 cents an hour, but the $1.50 still comes out after a 40-hour work week to only be $3,120, which would be considered an average paycheck for a lower middle class person in America. That's not good, folks. But when we look at what they make over the course of a year in California, Maine, Rhode Island, and New York, you're looking at spending nearly $60 an hour, $61 an hour for a salary of $128,000 paid by the taxpayer. So, what do we take from this? The public burden, right? Taxpayers cover the cost of high incarceration while receiving minimal economic benefits, as prisoners are underpaid and corporations often profit by exploiting this labor at artificially low costs. If you think that the federal minimum wage at $7.25 is too much, imagine that paying the people that you're going after because they can't find good jobs. This is what it comes down to. Our society is super dependent on cheap minimum wage labor that no one can support themselves on this wage. So then people fall through the cracks, right? If you're working at McDonald's for, let's say, in Arizona right now, until tomorrow morning, you are making $14.35 an hour. That is not enough to feed yourself, house yourself, or take the bus every day to your job, which means that you're going to have to turn to an alternative career, which may involve breaking the law. Which, of course, rich people don't like it when poor people don't follow the rules, so they're very tough on crime. Anything that poor people can do that evades them working for the corporations for the smallest amount of money, they are going to get tough against, right? They want to get tough against Johnny Sixpack that thinks that he can fund his lifestyle without having to work at a Kroger's or a Walmart. They want you working there. This is why every rich person thinks that every person, regardless, should be working. They don't care what you're working for, but they would prefer for you to be making as little as possible so that way they can make as much as humanly possible. Let's rewind to a couple of weeks ago, that greedy business owner that I saw that wants to sell you a program on how to become $1 million business while keeping wages limited to the minimum wage, and then complaining about workers who don't work hard and high turnover rates for your job. Why is that? Because people can't make a living. What is the downside to people not making a living? High incarceration rates because people are struggling. People like myself are out here working every single day for non-livable wages. If I can't buy a house, a nice car, and go on vacation, I'm a slave. And corporate America doesn't give a crap about you when you complain. If you complain, just like the people at Amazon are, they consider you to be ungrateful. You have the right to a steady paycheck. It is, excuse me, let me take that back. It is a privilege to make the minimum wage and have a steady paycheck. That's what corporate America thinks of its workers. When you put your nose up at these wages, then corporate America has a tendency to look at you as, oh, we need to get tough on crime. We need to get tough on people who don't want to work for bottom level wages because these people, they need to be brought into line. Because obviously you can't have billion-dollar corporations without extremely cheap labor. When I worked at Walmart, the first thing you find out when you work at Walmart is you qualify for food stamps. Guess what else you need to qualify? Low cost housing, because you're never going to make a living. My current job is in the same exact boat. They pitch this as a high as a high skilled job, but at the end of the day, you go home and you're still living here. Low cost housing. This is the cheapest place I could find in this area. People ask me all the time, why don't you move? I can't afford to move. If my apartment complex wasn't moving me out of here because of a pest infestation, I would be stuck here for the rest of my life. Because this cage is all that I can afford for my wages. And what does that lead me to? The fact that other people out there that don't have as much skill as I do in the workplace are going to fall down deeper and deeper into a hole that they will never be able to get out of, which eventually leads to the only affordable housing for single men, prison. Talking point number two, corporate tax avoidance. Many corporations benefiting from prison labor pay minimal or no taxes, further exasperating the public. Why does that sound like a word that why does that sound like flapping? Anyhow, I drank a lot last night, so I'm still pretty tipsy. So, exasperating the public financial burden, this shifts the cost to average taxpayers while reducing wages in the broader labor market. Reducing wages in the broader labor market doesn't go far enough to explain what they're doing. When you're going to offer nothing to people that are worth nothing, and then you get mad that they don't want to work for nothing, you have to look at the system and think something's broken here. The distortion of the labor market. Prison labor undercuts free market wages, driving down compensation for low skilled jobs and making it harder for law abiding workers to compete. This dynamic particularly harms marginalized groups already struggling to survive on minimum wage. Who does this hurt? Who do we see in jail more than anyone else? You see brown people, you see black people, you see people, you see poor whites. That's who you see in prison. Very rarely will a white collar criminal in our society, a person that's hurt society on the scale of millions of dollars through scheming or other ways of committing white collar crime, will they get the same punishment as a dope fiend on the corner. Why? Because even though that person did something terrible to society to benefit greatly, we still want to get tough on crime because poor people are scary. Poor people, especially of color, are treated disproportionately terrible by our society. As a person of color, I've felt that in my entire life. In fact, I continue to feel it. When I go to work, I don't feel like I belong there. Sometimes I go to work and I'm like, you know what, this isn't somewhere where I want to be, which is what happens to a lot of minority people who go to work in corporations that are primarily white people. Is that you don't feel comfortable there, and you know that your punishment is likely to be much higher regardless of what you've done in the face of the court system. So, moving on to talking point number four, the profitability of cheap prison labor creates incentives for higher incarceration rates, disproportionately targeting vulnerable communities and systemic inequality. Well, making systemic inequality worse for people that don't have access to high quality education or high quality jobs or high quality anything, because down here at the bottom everything is low quality. Our food, our housing, our relationships, everything is of the lowest quality. And the worst part is getting out of these situations. I've been trying to get out of minimum wage jobs my entire life. It's just not possible. There aren't any there aren't any steps on the ladder to climb out of it. People keep talking about a ladder, but as I've said before, either the ladder's invisible, it's a hologram, or it's painted onto the wall. There is no real way of escaping once you end up down here. The fact that you do not have any rich friends, any network, any rich networks, or any person that's going to take pity on you when you're working at the Dollar General for for 10 years. I know a person that worked at the Dollar General for 10 years, and they are a person that will never make enough money in order to live on their own. This person is 40 years old now and still lives at home and has never, ever made enough money to be able to live on her own. So I'm going to skip past the social and ethical implications. I'm just going to skip down here to the conclusion. Your observation is a sharp critique of how prison labor creates a hidden subsidy for corporations at the expense of taxpayers, low wage workers. The systemic undervaluation of labor and corporate tax avoidance highlights significant flaws in economic justice systems. Addressing this issue requires a reevaluating of prison labor policies, raising compensation for prisoners, and holding corporations accountable for fair wages and taxes. Fair wages. This is all I've ever asked for. And someone asked this in my live stream yesterday. It's like, why can't they just pay people based on a very, very simple equation, right? Super easy. This is how you pay people across the entire United States and possibly the world. You look at how much money they need in order to survive. Not survive, but live a comfortable life. People who are living comfortably don't have to commit crime in order to support themselves. If you pay people, and I don't care if this is just a card, electronic funds transferred to this person, all you have to do is either create affordable housing or just give people enough money so that they can afford to live on 25% of their wages, right? So if you're only going to pay someone $1,000 every 2 weeks, they better be able to find an apartment that costs $500 a month, which we all know doesn't exist. Where I currently live costs $500 a month 7 years ago. Has compensation gone up enough to cover the additional expenses that have been created through inflation? No. Therefore, people can't afford to live. So, 25% of your monthly income is going to go to rent. You're going to spend another 10% on food and another 10% on transportation. The rest of your money can be used on entertainment, vacations, or savings. Guess what? It's a simple plan. It doesn't take a rocket scientist in order to look at what people need to live on. If rent costs $1,800 a month on average for a one-bedroom apartment, you have a very bad problem in your society because the minimum wage isn't going to keep up with the cost of rent. And we know those people know this because if you only build new housing for families, right? You're only building homes for families. You're only building homes that are designed for people who can afford luxury housing, $3,000 to $5,000 a month. Now imagine that these people that are making $3,000 to $5,000 a month in order to pay their rent in their exclusive neighborhoods are making $20,000 a month. Now, I don't know any job that pays $20,000 a month, but it better be significant enough of society so that those places aren't going out of business, right? The luxury condo places aren't going out of business. It's places like where I live that can't fill enough apartments because even though this is the cheapest place in this area to live, there's probably 100 empty apartments in this apartment complex just right over from me. You can walk past the two buildings over there and you can look in the windows and they are all completely empty. There's so many empty businesses here in Tempe that it's ridiculous. There is a lot of people who aren't making it in our society, and we can directly point a finger at one reason for all of this turmoil in our society: evil corporations. That's really what it comes down to. Corporations that will fight any amount of talk of universal basic income, universal health care, better public assistance programs, anything that helps society. Oh, these corporations are against it. I mean, you're talking about basic human rights, and if they want to pay people $1.50 for working in prison, these are the kind of people that you're up against. The people that just don't care if you're not going to make it. These people are counting on you putting your head down and continuing to make the minimum wage. I think it's time. It's been time for a long time for the proletariat to rise up and say, you know what? It's not fair. They have rigged this system in their favor since the dawn of time, and it's time to stop letting them do that.